Good afternoon, Cole students. It is time to do your weekly essential number 5 and remember how to work with parallel and perpendicular lines. So let's come down here and I left this remember section for you. Two lines, if you remember, are parallel if and only if their slopes are equal to each other. So if they have the same slope, if you have two equations, they have the same slope, they are parallel. Now, I don't know if you remember this either, but when you have the y equals a number or x equals a number, that was a little bit tricky to remember what those slopes were. So we gave you this little Bucks-Hoy trick to remember what to do. Now, for the x one, right? So if you have like an x equals a number here, that was an undefined slope. That's where the u comes from. And it is the v is for vertical line. That is undefined slope. Now for y equals a number, the slopes are the slope is going to be 0, and that's a horizontal line. That's what Bucks-Hoy was all about. Do you remember perpendicular lines? What makes two slopes perpendicular? And that's when their slopes are negative or opposite reciprocals, depending on how your teacher said that, right? So two lines are perpendicular if and only if the product of their slopes is -1. So you could multiply the two slopes together and get -1. Let me go ahead and give you an example real quick. So 1/2, a slope that would be perpendicular to that would be -2/1. It's opposite and reciprocal, but don't forget, of course, -2/1 is the same thing as -2. All right, so let's take a look at these, and you need to be able to tell me if it's parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Let's look at number 1. Line P contains these 2 points. Do you remember how to find the slope of 2 points? Well, that equation looks something like this. Basically, we subtract the y's over subtract the x's, but make sure that you're consistent. If you do 8 minus 6, we need to then do -2 minus 2. Let's see what you get. You get 2 over -4, which is a -1/2. So for line P, we need to write down that the slope is -1/2. Let's do line B. It's going to be 9 minus 5, right, over 3 minus 1, that's 4/2, which is a +2. Are those parallel, perpendicular, or neither? That's what you need to be able to decide. And taking a look at that, I know that this is perpendicular because they are opposite. That first one's negative, this, and line B is positive. One of them says 1/2, and 2, of course, you could also write that as 2/1, which may help you see that it is opposite and it's reciprocal. Right, come over here to number 2. Now, looking at these, right, they did not give you points. Instead, you were given equations. How do you find the slope given the equation? Well, this one's not too bad because the first one, it's already in slope-intercept form, and 2, or the coefficient of x, that would give me my slope. So coming over here, where it says line K, I can see that my slope is simply 2. However, when you go to line H, this is not in slope-intercept form. I need to solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides. That gives me a -4y equals, I usually like to write down the x term or the linear term first. So it's -8x plus 12, and then divide everything by -4. You end up with y equals, let's simplify, -8 divided by -4 is a +2x minus 3. Hey, check it out. Do you see that slope right there? That's a +2. So I got a 2 and a 2, and that would make it parallel because they're exactly the same. Same slopes, parallel. Opposite reciprocal, they're perpendicular. Number 3 is like my favorite problem because I think it's one of the easiest problems to do. I don't have to solve for anything. I just need to know stuff. And knowing Bucks-Hoy makes this problem a whole lot easier. Remember, if I want a slope to be parallel, so the instructions say to find the slope of a line parallel and perpendicular to each given line. So I've got this line, x equals 3. Your first question should be, what is the slope of x equals 3? I'll tell you right now, it's not 3. Come over here to Bucks-Hoy and it will help you remember what it is. okay? X, the slope is, and it tells you right here that it's undefined slope. So if I want a slope that is parallel, I need the same one that I'm looking at over here, which is also going to be undefined. Y'all, what is perpendicular to undefined? What would be opposite and reciprocal of undefined? 0. Okay, go on to number 4. Get that out of the way. All right, so looking at number 4, the first thing you need to do is, per norm, you need to go ahead and solve for y. So coming over here, I'm going to subtract 3x first. Do 2y equals, write down negative 3x plus 6. If you wrote down 6 minus 3x, that's okay. It's just not in slope-intercept form, and it helps me to write down the x first. So then I need to divide everything by 2, and then take a look and see what I've got here. What is the slope? It's negative 3 over 2. So for a parallel line, I want it to be exactly the same. So let's go ahead and write down here negative 3 over 2. That's exactly the same as what I've got going on over here. What about the perpendicular? Opposite and reciprocal. So opposite of negative is positive, and reciprocal of 3 over 2 would be 2 over 3. Okay. Number 5. Oh, again, you've got a y equals just a plain number. What is the slope to that? You guessed it, it's 0. Okay, so you have, you can either put this in point slope form, but you don't need to. That's like the long route. We don't need to do that. We could go, I like to work smarter, not harder, right? And one of the things I take a look at is first of all, see what it is that it's asking me to do. It wants a parallel line to y equals 4. Well, the only other thing that's going to be y parallel to another y equals, or to a y equals, is another y equals. But y equals what number? Come over here. It wants you to contain this point, 3, 8. What's the y number of that point, or the y coordinate? It's 8. So it's going to be y equals 8. It is that easy. If the question asks you for a perpendicular, you would, instead of saying y equals, you would have to write down x equals, and you would write down x equals 3, because that's the x coordinate of the point. Come on down to number 6. We're going to write down the equation of a line that is perpendicular to this line here, but goes through this point. In order for you to do that, you've got to remember, and luckily for you, on the EOC especially, you won't have to memorize this formula. It will be given to you. That is point slope form. So what we need to do is come over here, and we need to start plugging things in. But first, before I can do really anything, I've got to solve for y. This is a really weird problem to solve for y, but you can do it. So solving for y means getting y by itself. I'm going to first go ahead and get rid of that positive 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. That gives me 2x minus 3 equals negative 4y. Then divide everything by negative 4. Let's clean it up. Cancel out those, that's gone, so I'm left with y equals, which is exactly what I want. This is the whole point of this, right? Negative 2/4 is negative 1/2 x, and negative 3 over negative 4 gives me a positive 3/4. Done. I've got my slope. What is it? Negative 1/2. Now that's not the slope I want to use, right? Because the question, if you go back, it wants you to have a perpendicular line. Well, what's perpendicular to negative 1/2? Positive 2. Did you say it? You did. Okay, let's go. Now let's go ahead and plug in this point into this formula with a 2 for the slope. So it's going to be y minus the y1, that's a 3, equals positive 2 for the slope, because that's what I want. I want it to be perpendicular. If it said parallel, I would put negative 1/2, but that's not what it said. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with the fraction, right? I've got a positive 2. Then it's x minus the x number of the point, which is negative 4. Hey, what's a minus negative become? A positive. All right, so this right here, what I just wrote down, I really should have written it down here, because this is point slope form. Put in a point, put in a slope, aptly called Point-slope form. All right, now the next thing is put it in slope-intercept form. All that means is solve for y, y'all. So go ahead now and distribute that 2, and then add 3. What do you get? You get y equals 2x plus 11, and that's your answer for slope-intercept equation. We got 2 more to do. Number 7. You want to write an equation of a line passing through the point 2, -4 and parallel to AB, which has the points -5, 6 and -7, 12. Y'all, this is the same thing as number 6. We just did this. But instead of giving me an equation where I need to figure out the slope, they give me 2 points where I need to figure out the slope. I'm going to use this in just a moment. But for now, I got to know what slope I'm working with. So I've got those 2 points right there. Find slope. Remember, subtract those y's. 12 minus 6 over -7 minus -5. Be careful with those negatives. That becomes a plus. So we get 6 over, what is that, -2, which equals -3. And it says parallel, which is awesome because I get to just use the slope -3 because I want the same slope. Now we got to plug it into the formula. Remember, this was our formula here. So it's y minus, we're using these numbers now. This is y1, that will give me my x1. So y minus -4, which actually becomes a positive, right? Equals, the slope is -3, and then x minus 2. All right, clean it up. Distribute that -3. -3 times a -2 is a positive 6. It's a commonly missed part, so be careful. And then subtract 4 because we are solving for y, y'all. And so I get from my answer, sorry, so messy, come over here with me, y equals -3x plus 2. Cool. Hopefully this is all coming back to you. Write the equation of a line for number 8 that is parallel to the one that is graphed now that contains that point. Do the same thing. This is the 3rd time we've done it, but this time there is a graph in front of you. What is the slope of this graph? Come on, find 2 points. 1, 2. Okay, rise over run. Remember this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Run 2. Okay. So we got y minus -3 equals, does it say parallel? Sure does. What is that slope? Rise over run makes it 5 over 2. We got this. Don't be scared. I got you covered here. All right. So now we got to distribute that 5 over 2. We got to just multiply. Just do it. Don't worry about it. 5 over 2 times x is 5 over 2x. 5 over 2 times -1, it's just -5 over 2. So far, so good, right? Now I need to solve for y, so I'm going to subtract 3. Did you see how I just made that into a plus sign? Because that minus and negative turns into a plus. And now we're going to subtract 3. So we get y equals 5 over 2x. Now it's time. What is -5 over 2 minus 3? Can we do some side work now? Minus 3, right? I'm going to change that 3 so that it has the same denominator of 2, because right now it's a 1. But if I multiply 1 times 2, 3 times 2 is 6. -11 over 2. Cool. So come over here and write that down. And that's your answer. Hope you enjoyed the video.